So, hello guys. Welcome back to yet another space. The space today will be mostly centered around the first quarter in 2024. Basically, a review of the action. The month of March has been extremely interesting, both with regard to the strategies chosen by both sides. So first of all, the Ukrainians have started to do exactly what Russia should have been doing for a while now, which is a counter value campaign. For instance, today they even hit a grain terminal, whatever you want to call it, in Rostov. The extent right now is not known. We will know more about it later. But they have tried to hit valuable pieces of the Russian, not really economy, but mostly revenue. This is a difference I want you guys to keep in mind. Right now, what the Ukrainians are trying to do is to deprive Russia of revenue, not that much deprive it from its quote-unquote economy. The grain hit today was something different because it's in Rostov. It's rather closer to the front. We don't know exactly what kind of drone was used. Probably once again a Lyut. The range rather short. Flight time probably between 2 and 3 hours, and probably it wasn't alone. So once again, one of the tactics that we've seen doing from the Ukrainian side for everything, be that cruise missiles, drones, whatever, have been opened up with flying trash. A lot of drones that have been found that are made out of construction tubes, out of paperboard tubes, stuff like that. Those are mostly used to open up. They are big enough, they are shiny. Those are the first one that the AD will start to pick up initially. Now it's a little bit more complicated because Russians have started to let those through as much as possible in order to discriminate what is the most interesting target. Yet once again, they managed to saturate areas, and thanks to the NATO, US, ISR, they know most of the evasion zones around localized air defense in Russia. This, once again, is very difficult to solve outright. It will require, as I said, like for many things in this war, a multi-spectrum approach. One of those is for things like vacuum towers, tracking towers, protective grids, netting, electronic warfare, along with other solutions. One of them, for instance, is trying to see incoming SIM cards in the network, because at least 20% of the drones that have been used right now against most of the, I'd say, sensitive targets, non-military sensitive targets, have been using a latching method. So basically, they are using a SIM card which connects to cell towers. The same thing that we saw the Russians do with the Shahid and that shitty camera. This allows them to go through and at some point be extremely more accurate, let's say it like this, and also in some cases for at least 3 to 4 new drones be able to receive a video feed which allows someone to fly that shit into fracking tower, um, vacuum tubes, stuff like that. But basically, there are some things that Russians can do right away in order to recognize new cars, stuff like that. This is all technical aspect. It's not very important right now because, as I said, the biggest problem for the Russians is not as much the technical aspect of the problem, it's the strategic choice that Ukrainians have made. The strategic choice is a counter-value campaign. What is the problem with the counter-value campaign? Is that by essence, it's a retaliation strategy. Ukrainians are using this as an offensive tool, but in reality is that they're retaliating from the Russian hit. And this, of course, once again, underscores the fact that Ukrainians have better control of the information. Not always. I'm going to speak about it right now because that's the second part of the strategic campaign that is happening right now. They control the information way better. So basically, they're going to say to you like the Shahids or cruise missiles or Zircon or whatever hit kindergartens, civilian areas, stuff like that. In reality, most of the time that's a lie, and most of the time certain damage is done. How far does this damage go? How serious it is? That's up to interpretation. But so far, almost every single strike that they have felt has been absolutely on point by the Russians, which also underscores the gain in accuracy of a couple of Russian strikes. One of the most important strikes, we all saw it, was a flash campaign against hydropower in Ukraine. Multiple TPPs were hit. I posted at least a couple of them. Most important part was the control and turbine room in the Zaporozhye hydropower central. That one was, in my opinion, long overdue, and in a sense, I said it was a warning shot because the way it was done was extremely accurate and also started a process with that dam that if the Russians want to go through it with violence and extreme prejudice will cause the crumbling of that dam over the course of multiple months, let's say 3 to 6, but that thing is going to go down. Don't forget, it's a huge work of art. It's a very strong structure, but has obvious flaws if submitted to deliberate targeting. One of them is the flooding of the control room and turbine room, and that can easily happen by starting to crack the sarcophagus off the dam by whatever you want, Iskanders, Tochkas even. Just put some explosive in there, start cracking that shit, and slowly, that thing is going out. Most important part, as I said, given location of the dam, you can even risk Sukhois with UMPK 1500s, put there 750 kilograms of explosive. Even if it's not completely accurate, just the fact that you can align 60, 70, 80, 100 UMPKs on target with a failure rate of 10%, that'd be 90, 20%, that'd be 80. You multiply 80 by 750, and you're going to get 60 what am I saying? What's 60 tons? 600 tons of explosive on target. So basically, you're going to have fun if you're Russian. But this is still now, as I said, and I would like to thank TWK for this, because at the beginning I was just of the opinion that the Russians will not try to do that because it would be a kind of red line for the West and it would be an intervention. Reality is not. I think that complicated, that far-fetched. It's just more that by the moment that this thing is done, which means the moment when the Russians have decided to pull the trigger and you start leveling dams, TPPs, and so on, and that allows you to advance, that freezes Ukraine in a certain sense. You find yourself closing to the Dnieper River in three years maybe, and you need to take care of those works of art. You need to repair them. The cost alone, I'm not speaking about the timetable, and the cost alone would be huge. And also, the areas you claim to want to, liberate, are going to be deprived from electricity for a while. As I said, if you want to take out the Zaporizhzhia gas, now with the UMPKs, with the capability of targeting that precisely, you're going to be able to do it. What you're not going to be able to do it is repair it immediately right now. If you are not there, it's still like 40 kilometers from the closest point, and you need to fight for Zaporozhye. Let us understand this. The city is far more complicated to defend than, let's say, Mariupol or Nikolaev, but still, it's a formidable perimeter, and also the Ukrainians can always come by the north. So right now, the Zaporozhye attack is a pipe dream without doing some very nasty shit to the local population, but that would also mean that de facto you're not going to liberate them, unless liberation in this case is sending them ad patres. But once again, these are just like thoughts. So strategically, the Russians gave a warning shot, according to data compiled by my dear friend and Timor criminal member Kinez. The drop from 17,000 gigawatt to 10,000 gigawatt after the series of attacks was certain. And now they, after the Ukrainians started to reactivate some of their nuclear power units that were on maintenance or were spared, they are back to 12,000. But you can still see that the loss of power by one single intentional strike was actually huge. But it doesn't stop there. Right now, the Russians somehow, for like a couple of days, a week at most, woke up and chose violence, literally, because they also hit multiple gas storage units and gas processing units in western Ukraine. Most important was in Lviv region. That shit burned quite easily and took out roughly, I think, 12% of the storage potential of the Ukrainian side. Those were supposed to be storage for the Europeans. Therefore, that's why I, with other people, I'm not alone in this, think the Russians did that. They didn't want to hurt the Ukrainians right away. Once again, this is bullshit. This is a bullshit attitude, in my opinion, but it is what it is. They just punished the Europeans and said, okay, that storage, you don't need it. You stole our storages in Germany. You cannot have them in Ukraine. And that's fine. That was a perfect ploy, let's be honest. But in total, I surmise that about 18 to 21% of the potential sources that Ukraine had for natural gas have been either completely disabled or are in dire need of repair. And of course, the most important part is that the UMPK campaign is unabated. So strategically, the Russians right now are just fucking dropping explosives from the air, and there is no stopping. So, as you might have guessed, the whole bullshit about 13 Su-34s shot down all the month of February and March, well, was bullshit. And it was all the more bullshit because we knew we are starting to see exactly what happened to any kind of asset that would try to intervene. It gets promptly spotted and fucking annihilated. We had a whole battery in Konstantinovka, south of Kharkov, that got erased. Like, hello, goodbye, done. Then we had, of course, during the month of March, given it's a quarter review, the magnificent hit on a full caravanning PAC-2 unit, including the ground control vehicle MSQ, plus a targeting radar. Amazing shit, honestly. Ukrainians, Butuzov actually, is the only one who recognized it, although we had some confirmation via obituaries, but Butuzov said 2 tells were done and 9 people died. I did a small analysis of the footage, the images that we saw. It's at least 3 tells, 1 MSQ, and of course 1 guidance radar, and at least 1 civilian vehicle. I think both accompanying civilian vehicles were gone, for a total of 20 killed, for sure. There's no discussion here. But it's a good start. I mean, Butuzov tried not to lie, outright lie, as he tried to do during the attacks in Avdiivka. So strategically, Russians are going for something that the Ukrainians were doing all over 2022 and part of 2023, which is taking out very important assets in the Ukrainian defense system, so air defense mostly, but also a new trend, which is artillery losses. The last 3 months have been absolutely smashing for the Ukrainians. And even if you go by the lowest common denominator, which is war spotting and lost armor has been dropping in quality immensely. I don't know what's going on. But for instance, when you go and check for SPGs from the 1st of January 2024 to 1st of April 2024, you would find that they list 25 SPGs lost. Among this list, and it's just an anecdote so you guys know, among this list you're going to find one of the 3 archers that were lost. The archer that is being actually inventorized is not even the archer they presented from their own video. So lost armor, sorry, somewhere around end of February, presented a specific video of them posting the hit on an archer in full extension. So the gun truck was firing and the Lancet found it. That video has even the logo Lost Armor. Is not on the list of the losses for the month of February. So for 3 months, they don't even list it. But they list something else that was submitted by another group, which is an archer traveling, getting hit on the back and burning, firing Inferno. If you want, I'm going to post all 3 to just, make sure you understand how bad Lost Armor. It's that bad I call them moist armor. Anyway, so basically, uniquely by videos, and I'm not saying some Lancet hit here and there, I'm literally saying by destruction, we are at least at 78 SPGs destroyed or heavily damaged. In total, we should be at around 120 vehicles, guns, and MLRS. And of course, it is Q1 2024. We saw at least 6 HIMARS destroyed and 2 HIMARS damaged. 6 HIMARS destroyed. I'm going to recall the list. We have 2 taken out in plain view. 1, exploded completely. Another one that everybody called a decoy wasn't a decoy because I found the battery commander that died in that strike. And also we had another 2 that were spotted by night and were treated by the Russians. Those 4, I'm not discussing it, they're gone. Then we have 2 damage that were revealed early in January. One was a Trubon Mines episode with one of the HIMARS vehicles rolling on a Ukrainian mine. The commander of the vehicle lost a leg, and the vehicle was put on a plane and sent back to the US. A second HIMARS was located trying to aim towards Avdiivka, I think, and covering towards Bahmut. It was peppered by 3 Smerch rockets. Rather nasty damage was done to it after looking closely to the images. That thing has probably wounded or killed the crew inside because there were open, gapping penetration marks on the cabin. If you want, once again, I'm going to post the pictures, zoom in, you're going to see nice, good holes on the door. And they're even marked by the crash test stickers. So those 2 not destroyed, but taken back to the US. And then we have one very specific targeting point that we saw. It was, I think, somewhere around northwestern Donetsk, a grouping of vehicles that initially looked to me like a command post. But then looking closer to it, you have three vehicles where two are, in my opinion, a 99.9% HIMARS. And they get hit by Iskander right in the middle of the Kister. And to me, honestly, two are gone. The third one, I don't know if it's HIMARS, but that vehicle too is raised. So in total, I have no problem believing that six are gone. Why do I have no problem believing that six are gone? The HIMARS for like 3 weeks just fucking disappeared. And right now they are reposting hits. Most of them are absolute failures. They are targeting nonas with HIMARS. They're targeting, I think, a single book. So we are back to just doing bullshit. They take out a book M1 and a book M3 radar, and then they lose the whole fucking battery of Nassams, and they lose the whole battery of S300 PS, including a targeting radar. Very important, because that's a nasty one to replace or to find a solution for. And then there are other stuff. They lose Strelas overall. They are starting to lose even worse assets, like another shot early in 2024 of a Patriot, not suspected, actual Patriot PAC-2 subunit, I'd say, hit in a barn in Kherson. And that was probably the one that shot down one of the Su-34s in 2023. So overall, the strategy on the Russian side has been going after very, very expensive pieces of the Ukraine defense system, artillery, air defense systems, early warning, and so on and so forth. This change, so as I said, this artillery exchange right now is completely changing, and you don't need to believe me. You just go to war spotting. They do only Russian losses, so they're not going to lie. Going to be maybe a bit late, but they're going to lie. Overall, we're looking at 70 to 120 in losses for 3 months. This had never happened before, except for 3 first weeks of the war. A lot of people are attributing this exchange to a lack of artillery ammunition. This is not true. The biggest ammunition, the biggest problem with Ukrainians is that they lack a sky control right now. Up to a certain point, they could hide. The Russians didn't have enough eyes on the sky. They didn't also have a direct connection. This is one thing also I always spoke a little bit. It's going to come up because it's slowly coming, and Ukrainians are starting to understand what's going on. It's not Starlink. It's a different system coming from a mesh configuration and using 4.5G. But that's something for the future. TT-125 posted something where the Ukrainians were complaining that the Russians had a encrypted system, rather well defended, that of course needed redundancy in order to work. But once again, there's not a problem for that. Redundancy actually was what the Russians were lacking at the beginning of the war. I explained that those systems were designed by someone who had no idea what war was, because they were extremely top-down, but extremely lean. So at any kind of moment, you took one or two systems, one or two clusters out of the whole vertical, and the whole fucking shebang would fucking fall to pieces. Here, with this mesh system, you have a completely different approach. Of course, you cannot do everything you want with it, but it allows you to be fully protected, up to a certain point, actually. Not fully protected. We shouldn't use the absolutes. It's a bad omen. But a very high level of encryption and protection of your communication on a wide chain of command, while of course keeping everything close so you know what's going on. And one of the solutions that the Russians had found, if they quote unquote a radio was lost, They simply had a number for it. It was crashed from the network. As simple as that. Stupid, but they would just pull the plug from it. The idea, the logic of it is very, very, very old school, but it worked. Anyway, this is something else. But most importantly, what I said, the Russians right now have a shorter response time. In the beginning, I wasn't sure about this. I was more like they were going after these assets, so of course they would have dedicated teams. But what we saw was that this response time was responsible for a wide array of targets. We had the UAV plus double helicopter team. We had trains, we had assembly points, we had deployment points next to the Russian border and so on. It is a fact. Something is going fast, something is safer, and something is there for this. It's a completely different approach than before. And I already said they have something that allows them. It seems to be a 5.4G network protected, and it seemed to me, and still seems to me, that it's foreign, it's not Russian. But from the Ukrainian experience themselves, it seems that it's just a multiple approach with maybe some SATCOM system, a more mundane, localized system like the mesh, and then something intermediary, probably foreign, probably had through, the largesses of one or the other major power. So this, for the moment, has allowed the Russians to do a lot of damage over time. What this is not allowing them, though, is still that perfect counter-battery response system. And a lot of people are now using that, yeah, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, because for now, the Russians have been ongoing through hard patches with a seemingly resurgent Ukrainian artillery system. This actually is not that true. I mean, you're gonna see the Ternicolum going on. You're gonna see a couple of other things going on. The reality is that most of the damage still is being done by FPVs, and the artillery shots, compared to where they were early 2023, late 2022, are nowhere near. HIMARS is still mostly absent. They are being far more cautious with it, and they are trying to find a way to fire it from literally the maximum limit, which, of course, is blocking their depth penetration. One of the things that Ukrainians have been doing right now, and it's a bit of a crazy logic, is using the few glide bombs or powered bombs. Powered bombs are the ASM 250 from the French, and the gliding bombs ZDAM-ER. The ZDAM-ERs have been a rather large disappointment because they are requiring the Ukrainians to fly at least to 4,000 to 5,000 meters to release the gliding bomb and then try to get the fuck out before someone catches them in the deed. With the French powered bombs, that's far more complicated. I had a small discussion within the group, and I said, because the bomb is powered, the French do not need to climb very high. They can just basically throw the bomb in a canted angle, which is called the giraffe. It's like a giraffe neck going up. And that the bomb is just going to fly, given its power, it's going to fly up to a certain point, and at a detection range, be that by a laser designator, which is available, guys. This is a very dangerous warhead on the French side, but mostly they're using GPS warheads. Gonna come to a point, GPS targets are going to cut the cruising drive on the engine, the turbo engine, and then the booster is going to make the missile, the bomb, actually powered bomb, go down as fast as possible. One of such occurrences you've seen, filmed by the Russians from the ground. The Russians themselves said that the bomb hit nowhere near them. Everybody was fine. I'll tend to believe them, but at least you saw it in action. It was roughly at 500-600 meters, and then it dipped extremely faster, a complete difference with the ground-launched small diameter bomb or the Jamir, which is not powered. It's literally gliding down to the target, which means that by friction, it's rather slow at the end. Not uncommon with the UMPKs from the Russian side. But the use of these assets into literally tactical wormholes like Tonenke or Olivka or the Avdivka front for Ukrainians, of course, means that there is a problem there. There is a lack of firepower, and also the situation is extremely precarious for them. And this is what in this first quarter of 2024 we've seen. The Ukrainians are fighting, they are stalling the Russians, but ultimately they are beaten back. There are areas where it is more complicated. In Terni, these guys are inching. In Kupiansk, it's even worse. They are literally like trying to push forward, but they have marked mostly pause, operational pause, in order to afford the Russians a better movement down in Donbass. And then probably when the situation is going to be a bit better, we've had a couple of strikes recently, the last couple of days on pontoons and remaining bridges over those call. So maybe some things are going to change on northern front, but mostly it's more a kind of attrition war where the Russians are applying artillery, some drones, and some UMPKs, and the action is mostly in Donbass, what everybody now is called the Pokrovsk front, while not even a month ago it was the Avdiivka front. All of this still going towards what we said in October 2023. It is a push of the front from Donetsk towards the axis Ugledar-Kalivka, and once it gets there, probably trying to push even further to reach somewhere between the Remensky Ledge and Kurakovo up in the sky, let's say like this. But basically, it is getting as close as possible towards Pokrovsk and shortening also the line towards Zapo. Once the line is shortened, as I said, this would allow the Russians to be able to hit both Gulyapolye and Orekov, whatever you want to call it, with UMPKs, artillery, multiple rocket launchers, and so on and so forth. So right now, plan hasn't changed. The Avdiivka timetable miraculously was held, so I'm very happy about that. But still, the rest of it, by the moment Avdiivka was abandoned by the Ukrainians until now, the Russians being on the Semenivka line, we have roughly 4 to 5 weeks that have passed. And we are exactly to the same point, tactically wise. The Russians are going to rush a little bit, take losses, do fundamental damage to the Ukrainian defense line, and then slowly the Ukrainians are just going to reel and yield. Once that happens, it's very simple. The Russians are going to take over and keep pushing. However, given both losses, because there are losses, guys, you need to absolutely be not oblivious of the situation. The Russians are paying a certain price for their victories, but as I always said, the biggest issue for Ukrainians is not that much they are causing damage to the Russians, is that in order to go to the offensive, they need to calculate at least as many damage proportionally that are dishing to the Russians now. And of course, we have the perfect example with the counteroffensive where the Russians are pushed. It failed more or less. Bakhmut is the perfect example. Russians pushed, lost some people, material, had Bakhmut at some point. Then the Ukrainians started the counteroffensive, and the first thing they did is start to stack up losses and ultimately attempting to regain Bakhmut caused one-third of their counteroffensive slated forces to be degraded to a point when they basically had to be pulled. Same thing Zaporozhye. We are at the point where the Russian defensive system is more than sufficient to take care of whatever the Ukrainians have now and would have down the line. Where the losses on the Ukrainian side are actually very important, human lives. They are not losing shit, like maybe they were losing 2022 and part of 2023. They are losing the tip of the spear right now. There is still meat. The law over the 500K peakers that are going to be enlisted is going to pass. Money for them is going to be given in a way or another. And we're going to have this thing that I call the Sisyphus paradigm, where the Russians are pushing, are going up to a certain point, and on their back, they're starting to reinforce the rear and prepare defensive lines. This means that if the Ukrainians will try to roll back at that point, so basically around Donetsk right now, Avdiivka, Novomikhailivka, Ugledar, and so on, they will have to basically trade the losses that they quote-unquote spared during the Russian offensive. This, of course, once again, is not what I would like to happen, but I think that this Sisyphus myth, so basically Sisyphus, what this guy was condemned to push a rock up worse, and then the rock would be impossible to push, would go back on him. Same thing for the Ukrainians. Right now they are dishing damage to the Russians because they're on defensive, but the moment they're going to start going the offensive again, they'll have to basically deal with everything in the Russian arsenal, and we'll have a replay of the Ukrainian counter, which is going to finish off whatever forces they have remaining from the 2023 force generation. Given in 2024, I do not see right now any kind of force generation, and also the pledges from the Western friends of Ukraine are not forthcoming with what we were expecting. So basically, right now there's no armor. A couple of things, like I think 3 Leopard 2A6 from Portugal, the 19 from Spain. Of course, there's a whole bunch of Leopard 1s A5s that needs to be somewhere. You got still most of the Abrams. You got some Leopard A2, Leopard 2 A5 1, Leopard 2 A6, probably about 40 that can still be lined up. 2 A4s, 20-ish. So if you pull everything together and you add maybe some Eastern tanks, you're gonna have like 500 tanks that Ukrainians can use as an active force without thinking about reserves. If they need to use everything and man a whole tank force, then I'm looking at about 1,000 tanks. But 1,000 tanks right now for the Ukrainians are simply not sustainable logistically wise. And the biggest problem, of course, you get still 13 Challengers as well. But the biggest problem is literally a very diverse park of spare parts, very diverse needs in terms of fuel, petroleum and other lubricants, ammunition, equipment. The Abrams didn't have a sustainability program, as we saw by the Congress inquiry on the situation. The Bradleys are not getting refurbished or replenished. They had enough Bradleys at some point, but the losses are starting to pile up. At least 4 Bradleys have been also captured. Small thing, but still, it's gone. And most important part, whatever is coming through the Ukrainians right now is really light armor. I spoke about the ISVs that are coming up. There are still a boatload of Russian senators that I love mocking, but still, they're going to be very important for the Ukrainians, at least for kind of mobility. They would need a lot of trucks. They are starting to show 30-year-old trucks from the US now as support systems. They would need a lot of engineering vehicles. This is not forthcoming. Only a few of them are coming through. And most important parts, they will need a lot of different ammunition to deal with it and different training programs. So I repeat what I said. If America is serious about Ukraine, at least not losing, at some point, end of 2024, early 2025, they will just grab everybody and say, fuck you guys. I hope Trump doesn't do it, but you never know with him. Fuck you guys, just get your shit together, put them everything that you've given the Ukrainians in reserve, second line, whatever, and we're gonna re-equip them from head to toe. So basically, 800 Bradleys, 500 Abrams. Boom, let's go. Only possibility to do it in short term would be plunder the strategic stocks, preposition stocks, or give the Ukrainians part of the US active inventory. This, of course, would have a huge impact because, thanks to SNEC, we know that the engine situation, actually the turbine situation for the Americans is not glorious, and also the capability of zero-hour condition tanks right now for the Americans is roughly around 180 tanks per year. So if you want to give 500 tanks, you're going to wait 3 years. So that's why I'm saying that the logic would be to, drop these Abrams from either some National Guard stock or their current active force, which would be an Abrams A1, M1A2, or M1A2, SEP, whatever, SEP V2, SEP V3, who the fuck cares? Basically, it would have to be current inventory. On the other side, the other big problem that Ukrainians are having, this is why they're going towards this madman theory, which is brandishing gun in the crowd, gun being the drone attacks on Russian infrastructure targets, of which now we hear from the Americans that should be a no-go because multiple reasons actually. It's not only about the price of fuel. It's also because, as I said, the Russians have a bigger stick. As simple as that. And they showed it. They literally, they erased 3 large hydropower projects. Gone. Whole control room gone. Whole turbine hole gone. And the Ukrainians very obviously went straight up, said, okay, guys, we kind of get it. But of course, there are 2 parts in the Ukrainian leadership right now. One part is the suicidal clan. They are there just to fucking wreck shit up. Budanov is part of that, and Zelensky wants to do that, but has another problem, is that by doing that, he's going to get hit harder. And now we also know, and this is why I said the warning shot from Russian side was effective, and I think was not as much directed towards the Ukrainians, because, well, who the fuck cares? These people are still going to be defeated overall. But it was to the allies and enablers of the Ukrainian leadership. So basically saying to the Americans, you know what? Fuck it. If you want, I can fucking blow a couple of dams, make you very happy, flood the whole Zaporozhye plain. You're gonna maybe kill 10, 15,000 people or do huge damage. But who the fuck cares? Those are Ukrainians anyway. This approach right now has never worked. The Russian leadership has never gone that far. But it will go there. Because on the other side, we had the most recent attack on two housing units in Alabuga, which in my opinion were intentionally targeted. They were not trying to destroy the factory. The factory is just too big to be destroyed by the kind of drone they used. What they're trying to do is literally kill and frighten the personnel. Of which, that's the funny part, apparently, not everybody was working in either of the plants, be that the Ores plant, the 2 Shahid plants, and then the development area, which does a bit of everything. part of the storage space next to the Alabuca Polytech is a subcontractor from Wild Berries. And one of those guys were literally like with fucking Wild Berry t-shirts, seeing the drones smacking on the dorms. But those things that are going on with Ukraine right now are unfortunately um, initially I call them mosquito bites, but they're not even that. Like, yeah, okay, I already published a couple of data. Most of the diesel production in Russia, not most, but a huge part, over 40%, is for export. And when it comes to gas well, to benzene, only 15% is. In both cases, Russia cutting the exports, of course, it's less revenue. That's not a problem. I mean, we fully understand. But it's also less diesel on the European market or the world market, as you wish. Now, on the other side, for itself, Russia has a protected uh, refining space, which is the Belarus. So if the Ukraine wants to do something there, they will have to actually have the casus belli towards Belarus. Of course, in in different terms, it doesn't matter. Ukrainians are fucking trash right now, so they don't care. Like they are like that junkie that you just don't want to approach because it probably has like all the STDs and also is like useless. It's just more trouble for yourself. That's Ukraine right now. It's just a fucking junkie, a corpse, which, in my opinion, should be put down, not by Russia, but by its backers, and in a sense, placated and help towards signing something that's tactically advantageous for them. Of course, they're going to lose territory, but at least they could still hang over onto some kind of Astana, Minsk bullshit system. But the Ukrainians right now are going for the kill, which means that they're going for their own kill. They are. Snake used to say that Russians want to negotiate and quote unquote capitulate. I don't agree with that term, but in a sense, yes, it's like letting a Pyrrhic victory go, but Zelensky is keeping them in the game by being retarded and calling. So, hello guys. As promised yesterday, we are back for a follow up. Apparently, another technical issue happened during the space yesterday, and unbeknownst to me, apparently I kept speaking for at least 30 minutes. And there was no reaction, so, well, basically, I thought that everything was fine. It wasn't. Therefore, we are first going to reintroduce a couple of things that we said yesterday, and then we are continuing with a bit of discussion on some of the things that are happening. Chiefly, apparently, the Russians are finally in Terni, and let's not get ahead of ourselves. Announcement about Terni and Yan Polivka have been galore. Mostly, they have been well unpleasant for the Russians, but let's see, because they were rather close, and well, the Ukrainians are slowly but surely going out of business around the area. So, to go back to what was said, first of all, yesterday we had a small recap on what things were important during the first quarter. There were multiple aspects. First of all, I said that there was a change in the strategic outlay that the Ukrainians were having. Basically, they finally started the counter value campaign. This counter value regarded mostly refining plants, refineries, both diesel oriented ones and gasoline oriented ones. So far, about between 12 and 15 refineries or locations have been impacted. Most of them rather on the low side, but some of them have been shut down for a while before restarting on a lower level. The loss of processing power for gasoline has been important. But as I said, the biggest problem for the Ukrainians is that this counter value was mainly aimed at the wallet, not as much on the functioning. And I already pointed out that in Russia's own capacities are for diesel geared mostly towards export, over 43 to 47%, depending how you want to look at it. And then on gasoline, between 12 and 17% is directed to export. Therefore, a slight threshold lowering, basically in this case, we're speaking about 12 to 14% of capacity loss. Although this is fluctuating because, as you know, there are maintenance schedules and so on. The Russians reacted, and that I said before, early in March, reacted pretty promptly by basically shutting down exports for gasoline, which meant that that buffer of 15% roughly served them nicely. There is no real disruption. Prices are going up, but it's not the way it is presented by the Western and Ukrainian media. And on the other side, the counter value campaign also started to hit some power plants, mainly chiefly substations, and some other production means. One of those was attacked yesterday, which apparently was supposed to be a granary in Rostov. Then it was explained it was a fuel depot. In both cases, we don't know what it was, but it wasn't a refinery, and it wasn't a fuel deposit stance. Most probably, it was a storage for machinery and port machinery. Overall, this counter value campaign basically is subduing a little bit. And I said we don't know which part is what, because the US has been showing itself extremely impatient when it comes to these strikes, given that they will have an impact both on oil price, but also the potential of disruption when it comes to the diesel market in Europe is going to be important. If Russia doesn't circumvent the current controls to supply its diesel outside of Europe, within Europe, so basically sell it to Turkey, and Turkey sells it back to Europe, then there might be a crunch. So the Americans there were a bit skeptical of these strikes and opposed to it. We have heard the U.S. ambassador to NATO being against it. We have heard via a third party and basically newspapers that the presidential administration, so Brandon, wasn't really happy about it. But on the other side, they clearly said we are not really in any shape or form able to stop them because it's their own assets that are using. Of course, this is bullshit, as I said, because in order to achieve these adventures, especially the latest strike in Tatarstan, they need targeting data, they need radar data, and they need a walk around it. And this, of course, is not currently available to the Ukrainians. This might also be something else that the Americans would have given this data up to a certain point, because it rarely changes, and the Ukrainians would have made good use of it, even now they have the tools for it. But mostly, I continue to say that it is mostly a campaign of both disinformation but also communication from the American side towards Russia, which is basically look, we're trying with these guys, but I don't know, like, do something, so I can do something. This is kind of bullshit bargaining that the Americans have tried all over 22 and 23 with extremely good results for Ukrainians 22 because the Russians had miscalculated, and then extremely negative results in 2023 for Ukrainians because then the Ukrainians had miscalculated. Overall, so as I said, this counter value campaign led to a reply from the Russians. That reply was extremely, extremely hard. And as I said, until now, we are having discussion why would the Russians not hit dams, bridges, all this pool of targets. With the time passing by, everybody was like, yeah, they don't do it because they don't have the capability to do it. And then suddenly the Russians do it very violently in short term with a severe loss of power generation capability. Once again, I would like to thank my buddy Kines, part of the Timor criminal crew at large, who provided me the movement on the production. And from the point of strike within the first 2 days, there was a loss of over 37% in power generation. Then it jumped back with only about 28% missing, but mostly the strikes had a huge impact. Most important impact of the strikes was, as I said, is that they showed that, first of all, the Russians were precise enough, had enough capability to strike these areas. And in my opinion, they also have the capability to sustain these strikes. What they did, as I said, was a warning to the Ukrainians. This warning was serious enough. So basically, engine room in the Zaporizhzhia hydropower plant was fucked. One of the engine rooms and one of the turbine rooms were fucked. The strikes were extremely precise. I mean, there are pictures everywhere. I'm not gonna start doing this. And then there is another strike that I pointed out where the complete machine room and the control room was fried. This was way deeper. It was behind Uman in Ukraine. This was, in my opinion, a clear show that we can get to you guys, and we also know how to get to you. There was an article. I'm gonna cite another member of the team or criminal who pointed out to me. Who is Zouave de la Garde, Nether Threat, his handle, and that article from Politico was pointing out that a couple of strikes initially by the Russians, where they were firing from northern Crimea, which would imply these strikes were from the ground. And this is very funny because firing from the ground would mean that there is a Club K system where without warhead, there were just factotums, and the Ukrainians in the article were surmising that this was a range finding. I think there was a loss in translation there. It was sniffing or probing, which meant that the club cruise missiles was sent with a set of data which would emit or react live while flying, and would also allow the Russians to map a path for the cruise missiles. Do not forget, a map for Shahids and map for cruise missiles are two completely different things, mostly because the cruise missiles would fly at the moment almost 3 times as fast as the Shahid. But yeah, generally, I think that the Russians tried their hands with probes sniffing, breach of air defense zones and stuff like that, which of course was to be expected, and the Russians had been doing that with a lot of flying trash, just like the Ukrainians. What wasn't expected is strikes very deep in Ukraine, northwest of it, with one of the gas storages, as I said, and that was literally the first real counter value that the Russians have done within 12 months. And that gas storage, along with a second one, were representative of something between 12 to 14% of the Ukrainian capacity for gas storage, and according to many, were gas storages that the Ukrainians were going to loan or use to store European gas for the upcoming season. Um, Very well played. As I said, the Russians, instead of both hurting the Ukrainians uh, with some critical storage, they did the same as the Americans. Like we would like our missiles to not hit anything that's dear to you, but it's in Ukraine, so we can hit it. And basically, that was more pressure added to the relationship between Russia and Europe, but also in the plans that Europe has to help Ukraine down the road by affording it some payments in return of services or goods or whatever. So that relationship was short-lived. So renting more storage capacity in Ukraine is going to be extremely difficult, and also something that I said way before this, almost 2 years now, that whatever the Europeans try to build of any kind of decent size as a weapon factory will be seen and will be hit. Ukrainians now are playing this game that they are going to sheds with toolkits and shit like that and pretending that they build their own weaponry. But the reality, most of it is assembly, and of course, the parts are coming from abroad. One of the biggest problems right now to stop long-range drones on the Ukrainian side at the construction level is unfortunately that most of the parts are produced abroad. One of the logics that I said is that if you check the Rotax engines that have been started to be spot on Ukrainian long-range drones, not every one, of course, of them, but for instance, the Foxbat A-22 from Aeropract that was used to attack the dorms in Yelabuga. Well, those fly with a Rotax for 912 ULS. And of those, if they're going to start doing this, they're going to have a choke point at some moment because Rotax only builds about 4,000 of them per year, and they are used in a range of applications. But overall, the point is that you cannot stop Ukraine using these assets right now because it's not military production. It's mainly assembly, and for that they just need a shed and a couple of trucks. And as we have seen, the Ukrainians love hiding their shit in civilian, both vehicles but also premises. Which makes sense, by the way. They are the lesser side in here. Um, Beyond the strategic attempt by the Ukrainians during the first quarter, we've seen a couple of Russian ships lost to USVs from Ukraine. But at some point it stopped. It stopped both because the Russians now are starting to take things a little bit more seriously, but most importantly is because the Ukrainians, I think, have been told to behave, because then the Russians are going to start applying counter value in the Black Sea, and there is where the problems are going to start for Ukraine. Right now, a huge part of Ukraine's sales, Ukraine's exports, still goes to the Black Sea, and it's not only grains; it's a lot of other things. But right now, that's the point. So, if the Black Sea is disrupted, even though it leads to a unrestricted naval warfare, Russia has the possibility to go around the Black Sea port. It's going to take more money, more cost, but deep down, it's not a problem. And in the best case scenario, as I said, you can have completely different ships going through the sea and then just dumping them in whatever goods, dumping them in Turkey and then doing the rest by truck. Ironically, is what the Ukrainians did to bomb the Kerch Bridge in 2022. They literally took that road. So there are options for Russia without suffering that much from unrestricted naval warfare. It will become a huge problem. Let's not lie about it, but that's how it is with this form of warfare, because then the Ukrainians are going to start to hit every single boat. Of course, they will have to, as I said, produce more of these USVs, have a bigger footprint, get bombed. This, but it will not stop them. That's the problem. So, like, you are just going to make it more expensive for them. But at this point, Ukraine doesn't care. They're on a road to perdition. So, as I said, there is no logic when it comes to the destruction, the potential destruction the Ukrainian polity is going to sustain. The people behind these actions, they don't care about the Ukrainian people as it stands right now. They think they do, but they don't. One of the most important parts is that the same guys who pretend they care about Ukrainian people are engaged in these shitty operations in Belgorod, which is also a part of the review. Uh, in that only operation, Ukraine lost for that very short span more tanks that it would otherwise lose within probably 2 to 3 weeks. We're speaking about over 15 tanks overall, bombed 30 kilometers from there with the Artan intelligence group. Another 8 tanks were taken out around the Russian border. So that small 4 or 5 days time frame cost the Ukrainians a huge number of tanks, as I said, and also demining vehicles. This problem of these attempts, of course, this was followed by the Crocus City Hall attack, which may or may not be linked. I have no opinion, and if it's linked, it wouldn't surprise me. If it's not linked, well, that issue also made the security situation in Russia a bit more one-sided, because like what's going to the region, and they were more focused there. It's possible. I'm not saying it's true. So the biggest problem that we have right now with Ukraine is that they are not embarked into a military strategy or how to defeat Russia. They are accepting this attrition war. They are causing damage, as I said, but I do not see also none coming from America, Europe, and any other friend of the Ukrainian people, let's call them like this, any kind of capability that would at least replace what was lost. And even based on Oryx numbers, a good chunk of the Western tanks has been hit. The latest Abrams hit was shown today. 2 FPVs, one took out the engine, and second one attacked part of the crew that was waiting outside, and probably the bustle, ammunition bustle. Nimrod Badge has the footage. He posted initially as a Leopard 2A4, but it was an Abrams, which was funnier yet. On Leopard side, the numbers have been dwindling since a while, but now it's worse because a huge part of them, about 20, are currently under repair, a bit overall in Europe. Roughly 60 Leopard 2s have been affected. The STRV, so the Leopard 2A5 in Swedish livery, has been probably extinct. So it's not on the battlefield anymore. It's being either repaired for a couple of Leopards that were damaged, or simply is destroyed. It's hiding in some hangar back in Kharkov Oblast, or has been already expedited. Some new tanks are coming. 3 Leopard 2A6 from Portugal, about 19 from Spain to A4s, which were in very bad state, so those need to be refurbished. So all these things, plus, as I said, some artillery from Greece with limited range, some artillery from France, but what initially was planned to be given also by Denmark is actually going to be sold to one of the Baltics, which would again take out barrels from Ukraine. Initially, it was more or less foreseen to give 60 Caesars plus 6 that Ukraine had paid for itself. Although I think that those 6 have already been delivered, so therefore we still have this ambiguity: what, which, how. And on the other part, as I said, whatever the French, German, American are being given to the Ukrainians on this strategic level, the Russians have been matching it. As I said, images early March were about 13 of them on the assembly chain. Early January, we had another 8 of them that were assembled and being tested. So we can count on at least 21 MSTA SM2s with the longer barrel. So when it comes to purely barrel addition from scratch, we are at the same spot. Then there is the whole Bogdana charade. But as I said, if the Bogdanas are that obvious and that everywhere, we should see kills of them, because you cannot cheat. Even the archers, out of the 8 that were given, 3 were destroyed or severely damaged. Those Bogdanas are not better than the archers, so they should be visible. They aren't, and there's a reason for this, because most of the time, a bit like the Panzerhaubitze 2000, either are keeping range, but the Bogdanas would have a problem given their gun design. Either there are just not enough of them, which would be also logical. If they have 15, 16 Bogdanas, would be already nice. We are speaking about a country that is not producing that system on its own. What they're doing is assembling the chassis for it. Some of them, we saw them in some footage, and then the barrels are, and the articulated chassis and system is being built in Slovakia. This thing is put together somewhere between Slovakia and Ukraine and then sent to the front. So overall, the strategy right now, given many factors, is showing the way to Ukraine in 2024, which is basically try to get through the year. Don't forget, we're already in April. It's going fast, extremely fast. And we don't see generally something positive for the Ukrainian side, but they are not cracking either. I'm going to say I expect their maneuver, if nothing changes. I'm not saying that nothing, that no one receive anything, but if nothing changes when it comes to what is making their life difficult on the Russian side, the Ukrainians will not be able to sustain their maneuver corps come late 2025. There is a way out of this. There is a way where Ukraine can have a better chance, and they can maybe try something, and that would be, and I said that yesterday, that the Americans literally put every single other thing except for the artillery, because they have shitty artillery right now, on the side, give the Ukrainians a whole bunch of Abrams, between 400 and 600 of them, and a whole bunch of Bradleys, between 800 to 1,200. Yesterday I spoke about 400 Abrams, about 800 Bradleys. The problem is that given the losses themselves, not speaking Bradleys, but the losses in other equipment, in order to shape a good, strong, active core of between 60 and 80,000 people that could have a chance to at least try and breach through Zaporozhye, with the help of F-16s, with the help of ASM 250s and so on. So with a far more potent arsenal, it would require that the Americans literally, and for this I have to thank Dr. Snekotron on that, Americans would have to give sorry guys, just a message. Or they would have to basically strip one or the other National Guard unit, but completely. We're not speaking about something small. We're literally speaking about having whole brigades stripped out of their equipment and be sent to Ukraine. At that point, guys, can you still hear me, or can you still hear me? Okay, okay. If you can hear me, it's fine. Sorry, guys. So basically, what's going on is the following. Um, America would have to strip a lot of these active units. It would also have to start pulling out the engines. Once again, I said I would like to thank Snake for that, for pulling out the info. If you want to line up roughly 500 Abrams, you will have to at least pull out 800 engines. I would go for 1,200 in any case because you want to avoid cannibalization. But we have also the other problem now with these Western tanks that um, they are too heavy. So when you lose them, we saw the Russians themselves uh, lose two Brem trying to pull one Leopard 2A5 around Terni. And it's very complicated to actually do something once you lose them. Therefore, as I said, you cannot also cannibalize it. You cannot pull it as you want. So for that, I would go with more engines, but that would mean that you will take them out from the existing park, which means that if you need to rebuild your American fleet, you would also have to start spending a fuck ton of money, which, in my opinion, is not going to happen. That's why, from the beginning, the Americans first sent a rather limited quantity of Abrams tanks, but also didn't have a proper sustainment program. Although we can surmise that it was done because they thought that things were going to go all funky fresh, and it didn't happen. So overall, Ukraine has been badly battered. Loss of Avdiivka, loss of a couple of smaller municipalities. Nova Mikhailovka is going to be lost. As I said, there are rumors that are interning. If they are interning, fine. There is a push towards the 0532 that connects Ugledar to the north and central of Donetsk Oblast. So overall, we are having this big issue that the Russian onslaught is slow, is creeping, but that's it's par for course for what we had underlined as the main issue of Russian ill planning, let's say, or ill preparation to the realities of combat on a defensive posture from the Ukrainian side, with all its helps. So basically, Western ISR, drones, FPVs, and so on. So on that aspect, now the Russians going grinding it out little by little, and not having these huge breakthroughs that could actually force the Ukrainians to maybe do stupid things or surrender huge parts of their country. Now we are into grinding phase where the problem of the Ukrainians is not that much that they're going to win or lose. The problem of the Ukrainians, as I said, at which point they start to understand that, okay, we are going toe to toe in losses with the Russians, but it's not how it should be. We should kill like 10 times more Russians than we are losing. And as I said, we can surmise whatever we want, but even in the worst case scenarios, we are not seeing those 100 Russians killed for one Ukrainian. And a great part of it is that the Russians finally have a very big stand of threat when it comes to exploitation of uh, positions, and that's of course is the UMPK glide kits. ISR is better, Como is better. Yesterday I explained that um, the Russians have been going through these dollar store, ghetto rigged, whatever you want to call it, local innovations that have then been, upscaled, and they work more or less okay for what can be called okay in this war, because obviously it's a very difficult environment for that. But that has led to many hilarious moments where okay, a couple of ships lost to USVs because of lack of preparation and lack of control on the Russian side. But then Ukrainians lose helicopters to new Russian missiles. They lose drones. Of course, I'm not going to come back to the HIMARS series because, as I said, I maintain that the Russians took out at least 6 HIMARS during the first quarter 2024, and two other were damaged, as we saw being transported in the US. So overall, there is a quality jump there on the Russian side on many aspects. And one of the biggest quality jump, as I said, is that slowly, the UMPKs are becoming a lot more precise. We started with a rather mundane guidance plate in March and April 2023. Then we went to the Cometa single plate. Now we have a double Cometa plate. Um, we have had for the UMPKs more uh, control surfaces for unfortunately for the Fab 500, which is the most useful and used dumb bomb with the kits. You got only the rear controlling surfaces, which makes it a bit complicated, and the accuracy depends mainly on the point of release. But now, as I said, for UMPK 1500, there are 4 controlling panels, and then you have for the ODAB UMPKs 4 controlling planes, 2 on the rear and 2 were canted vertical. So the Russians are evolving. There's the UMPB, Grom has been used. I mean, like, we can speak about all this stuff, but these guys are evolving. They're learning their lesson. They're going forward. We can also speak about, I had a discussion with Timor Criminal. The Krasnopol, for instance, has been completely redesigned on its rear clasp. The folding fins are not complete on the rear, they're forward now on the body. There is a data bus for GPS that wasn't visible before. Overall, the Russians are being dragged in the 21st century by this war militarily. For the rest, that's something else. But also the Russian society. I've seen a couple of very interesting Telegram channels announce that, for instance, the immigration process within the Russian Federation is still a paper and pen process. So basically, you have physical documents, but it could be so much better with virtualization, so paperless red tape and stuff like that. That's good, but the best part of it is that the same system can be used for something completely different, which could help at least the Russians better formalize and streamline production, tracking of their productivity, and also tracking of their troops and so on. So the Russian society itself is literally being barged into 21st century. And whereas it's true that the young people are tech savvy mostly, uh, the boomers, so basically the control instruments, they are also being pulled within a more modern era. And this, as I said, is purely forced by the fact that you cannot start doing what you're doing in 1980, 1990 Although, as I said, the tools still mostly are of that era: the tanks, the guns, the planes, the helicopters. We are still in this transition phase between beyond the second half of the 21st century and the 20th century when it comes to direct fire assets, transportation, logistics, and so on. This was a strong point of the Ukrainians because, of course, it was managed and at least guided abroad. But now it's playing against them. It's playing against them because, for instance, as I said, by trying to be transparent, those idiots are giving open source data to the Russians to what's going on. So last year, up until this year, so between November and March 2024, November 23, March 24, about 1,000 pickups were to be bought for a eye-watering price of $40,000 a piece, which is a whole new ball game of grifting. And ironically, these pickups are more than probably going to be used as chassis as base for armored vehicles. At the beginning, I wasn't really understanding it, but now I completely get it, and it goes hand to hand with the Rochelle senators that are being provided with the brand new iguana bullshit map that the Ukrainians pretend to have been gotten to the level of the MATV or GLTV, whatever you call it. We are going to this Potemkin war economy in Ukraine, whereas actually instead of being cheap, everything is being extremely expensive. And we are with this problem, this main problem that despite the fact that the war is going against them, they are keeping with a certain plan that looks a lot like the Russian plan not last year, but in 2022, where it was completely out of whack. These guys were like, yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But everything was out of whack. They were still relying on very old style artillery. UAV control was bad. They were losing a lot of stuff in movement, not in during attacks. It was literally during transition. You could have whole batteries of artillery going down. I'm not speaking early in war. I'm speaking literally like up until March 2023. There was no problem to see a completely burnt out battery of MSTS stopped being the case just before the counter, happened once during the counter. Some MLRs were still gotten like that because, well, you cannot always change Rusnia. But all these things, like with the Russians, are going down. What isn't going down, though, is the choice of, trying to still uh, go into the offense with a mechanized way. And there is unfortunately also no choice other than that. Going by foot is just going to get you killed. The same way Ukrainians got absolutely fucked in Robotine, the same way the Russians are going to get fucked up for as long as the Ukrainians can stay on the spot and just launch FPVs. This, of course, as I said, we got back to the Sisyphus myth, but whatever you do to the Russians when they're on the offense, you're going to get done to you when you're going to go to the offense. Because now defense is extremely cheap. It's literally fly 5 to 6 drones for a 5 to 6 kilometer defense perimeter, and then just let them come. I'm not speaking about mines, I'm not speaking about artillery, I'm not speaking about Lancets, I'm not speaking about helicopters, I'm just speaking about FPVs. Right now, the Ukrainian side doesn't have an answer to FPVs either. I read today a description from Adyar to the fact that Russians have completely stopped by going to assault into Krinky. They have gone far enough. Tanks do not come to the to the forefront. What's happening though is that they get FPV. But the same guy was explaining to us like 2 months or 3 months ago that they would take out 300 FPVs over the course of 4 or 5 weeks by electronic warfare. Suddenly, he's saying that they're sending 100 FPVs per day. How much I would believe Madiar? Honestly, as far as I could throw him, not even that. But still, the fact that he's starting to complain like that means that the whole FPV game is just a catching up game right now. So whatever the Russians did well, Ukraine's going to catch up with. Whatever the Ukrainians are going to do well, the Russians are going to catch up with. The most important problem, as I said, with the FPVs is to, um, at least on the front line, stop the rest of it from coming. And for that, we're going to go to the second step of the space, which is going back to the decision for the Ukrainians to start building reinforced structures, trenches, all this shit. Honestly, as I said initially, we have a huge problem with the Ukrainians because they have chosen the wrong bet again. Why is it the wrong bet? Mostly because, as I said, you need to start filling up whatever trenches that you are creating. They are speaking about a plan to build about 11,000 kilometers of trenches, which would more or less be a triple line of 4,000 kilometers. Let's say 3,500, 3,700. By um, doing so, you still need to, as the Russians did actually, Zaporozhye, but the Russians just built a smallish network, deeper and denser, of course, but it was smallish. It was about 800, 900 kilometers in double line plus crumple zones. And not everything was interconnected. Only the ways they wanted to defend absolutely were interconnected. On top of it, they had the extremely great luck with them that someone blew up the Kakova Dam, which meant that a huge part of the fortifications were de facto useless, but also nobody was going to attack from there. So in that aspect, it was like a blessing in disguise. However, the Ukrainians do not have that. In Zapo alone, as I said, they are about at 900 kilometers, but it's not finished, and it's for the moment a continuous line. Um, so to equip that stuff, those 900, at least partially one third, as I said, you will need for good effect 8,000 people minimum just to block uh, the front line of the Zaporozhye areas that you are defending with trenches. But the problem with trenches, as I said, is that you are going to immobilize people there, which also means that because the trenches need to be manned, they are easy, quote unquote, to find. And of course, you will have to treat them, but treating them with artillery is risky because counter battery. With Iskander, tornadoes, and so on, it's maybe too expensive. Well, as I said yesterday, with a UMPK barrage, maybe it's not going to be that precise, but I showed you already with a picture yesterday or this morning, depending on, you can see that a UMPK has landed just next to Dragon Teeth line in Zaporozhye, which is just next to the Zaporozhye city. It's southeast of it. And you can literally see that the crater of that bomb, of course, people are saying, yeah, but you're going to crater it. It's going to be complicated to go through it. The point is, if you can place multiple strikes next to each other, the whole system there can be easily then pushed and excavated. literally what the British tried to show up with his dragon teeth when the Challenger was plowing through. You can just do the same and plow your way into that hole and then out of that hole. It's a lot simple to do it like that than try to go through the choke points that the Ukrainians have built themselves. Of course, it's not that simple because these areas are going to be mined, extensively mined. In my opinion, when I hear 11,000 kilometers of trench lines, even divided by three, it means that you're going to have to mine 4,000 kilometers in length and probably at least depths of 2 to 300 meters with a separation of roughly 1.5 meters per each side. We are looking at huge minefields that, in my opinion, the Ukrainians just do not have the mines for. So it's very simple. I'm telling you guys, it would require a fuck ton of mines alone. I'm not speaking about the concrete. I'm not speaking about the fortification. I'm not speaking about the men. But if you start looking at the logistical plan, you're like, are these people insane? What's going on with them? You are the side who has less. You are the side who's going to invest a lot more. For finally, if you analyze it properly, let's say you equip these 4,000 kilometers with 10 men per kilometer on the first line, you are still immobilizing 40,000 people. And if you mobilize 500,000 people, of which let's say 60% are going to be frontline troops, immobilizing 40,000 just on your defensive line is a huge chunk of them. And also, it means that there are 40,000 people that you are literally presenting to the Russians to kill. Because, as I said, even if the Russians don't want to advance, but your lines are manned and you have these strong points, these pillboxes, Russians are just going to EMPK that shit. It's very simple. So you are creating the perfect self-extinction system, which is exactly what the Ukrainians, by the way, tried to do to the Russians in Robotine and in Lobkov. It worked a little bit better in the Vermensky Ledge because, well, multiple mistakes, but also the overall crumple zone construction. But mostly, once again, I said, to me, it makes no sense. It could be looked at a cheaper way not to have to mechanize these guys. We saw that recently. One mechanized brigade had to go down as an infantry brigade. It could be a solution not to mechanize these people because finally, for a trench, you don't need tanks, you don't need APCs. You can drop these guys by pickups and shit like that. But at the same time, you deprive them of their mobility because let's say you are putting your shit pickup there, or you are not, you're pulling it out. These guys start to get UMPK'd. A couple of them, as I said, start breaching the reinforced sleeping places and stuff like that. Then what do you do with them? They're gonna start to walk back 5, 10, 15 kilometers. It's mindless. And that was the whole strategy of the Russians, to have these crumple zones and then dig outs and some tunnels. And, it would allow them to just move around. But the Ukrainians, when you see how the defenses are built, to me, it screams mind blowing cretinism. And this cretinism, this is the funny part, this cretinism is literally them copying what the Russians did in 2022, early 2023. Only they do not understand why the Russians did it. So overall, we also have to protect them because, as I said, initially the Russians are probably going to UMPK the place. Then the artillery is going to start working on the fleeing defenses. Of course, then it will be the time to attack with mechanized forces. FPVs are going to come to play. Um, and honestly, it looks like it's going to be a bloody affair if the Russians push it through. But if the Russians don't, if the Russians just, you know, keep them into those lines and just bomb them, what if? So these trenches that are, in a sense, a pale copy of, uh, I'd say, intellectually wise, these trenches are just going to create the possibility for the Russians to kill even more Ukrainians. And the same logic would have been presented to me last year by saying, yeah, but the same is going to happen to the Russians. I'm like, yeah, for sure, no problem. I would be the first to say that if you have the same assets. But if your only long range asset right now is the HIMARS, and you sprinkle it from time to time with one or two GDAMs or ISM 250, don't see really the big change. On the other side, when you check it, HIMARS only restarted to strike recently because there was this lull after they got called by Iskander. But the reality and the logic is coming back to the same. You are not extending the type of capabilities that you have. And when this happens qualitatively, so basically you use ASM, you use JDAM and so on, you got really low quantities. As I said, I pointed out that for January and February, the numbers based on the data and the indications on the UMPK kits were 1,900 kits built between January and February 2024. We don't know for March. We haven't had indiscretions via the Ukrainians. And of course, Russia, I'm not going to say it, it's logical. But if we stay on the same principle, so basically about 1,000 per month, god damn it, man. Plus, there was this talk about the new MPK 3000. But when you think about it properly, UMPK 1500 is going to be plenty for what we're seeing as reinforcement in the structures that Ukrainians are building. Then there is the logistical aspect. Now, everybody was talking about this Czech initiative to give Ukrainians their much needed artillery. Initially, I started this by saying, okay, maybe the Czechs found some stock, and the rest is going to be produced. So that was the logic because they said 800,000 rounds, 500,000 to 155, 300,000 to 122, 1.5 million euros. And I said, okay, if we drop it properly, we're seeing 500,000, 155 with an average price of 2,000, and 300,000, 122, average price 500,000, 500 million, so about 1,500 a piece. It looked perfectly logical, especially because the 122s, I thought those were stock. However, now we have numbers by Germany and Belgium, and they both say that they are providing 180,000 155s at 580 million euros, which suddenly changes the price completely. But the Belgians have it even worse because they're paying 200 million euros for 50,000 rounds. And then we go from, as I said, a aggregate price per round at 2,000 euros to an aggregate price per round roughly around 2,400 euros. And then you have this idea that wait, that cannot be stock because those are prices that you would pay in the market outside of Europe because labor costs and so on. Or the Czechs were stupid enough to find stock and pay it as new. Which, I mean, in Albanian we have an expression, it's basically "Chichitam and part of a bite," and it's basically who the fuck cares? It's dad's money. And in this case, it's not their money. It's not the Czechs' money. The Czechs are literally playing the middleman. And also, this would also explain why the artillery ammunition situation is not changing, because in fact, we spoke a lot about this shit, but finally the funding, be that pledged or actually funded, is at roughly 1.2 billion. So it's not even the full 1.5 billion. But by being at the 70 something percent, 78% of the total, and we do a small analysis, if the Belgians and the Germans are paying that price, the total price cannot be the same. So the 1.5 billion looks a lot to be for 500,000 155 rounds, and the extra 122s have an extra price tag. And then we go back to, as I said, you can go to Radio Team War Crime, Radio Team War Criminal in YouTube, not my channel, by the way. Thank you very much for holding it. And go back to the episode 10, and you start from the 20th minute of that recording, and you're going to exactly understand what I mean. What's happening right now is that they are plundering the market, both on stock, but they're also contracting manufacturing capability, which means that, of course, they do not have to spend the money to expand their capability at home. To my opinion, this is lost money because you are not offsetting it with anything else except giving it to Ukraine to waste. But at the same time, that means that we are back to the same bullshit we've had with Europe all over this war, where they say something, but they cannot just keep up with it. Because if indeed now we get to the point that 1.5 billion euros are not for the whole deal, 800,000 pieces, but they are only for 500,000, and most of it is new production, so it will take time to deliver. It's good. Actually, it's true, because that means that the Europeans are going to deliver a bit more until the end of the year. But it also means that the budget initially laid out for the European peace initiative, basically buying weapons, which is very funny, by the way, buying weapons for peace, means that the budget is going to be exceeded. Where's the money going to come from? Now, let's not exaggerate. It's not a huge sum of money, and people who want to spend that money for this, they're going to do it. So it's not the money as it stands. It's the upkeep, it's the control, and the spiraling costs. The whole war is completely spiraling out of cost control. Once again, it's not lethal. This doesn't really hit the European continent that much. Although the losses are massive, but they will do it. But the problem is that we are into a logic where Europeans have underestimated almost everything, a bit as the Russians. Russians are 2022 as on a completely retarded base, and then 2023 rebuild time and confidence year, because, well, basically they smashed the Ukrainian counter and they started seizing ground again. And 2024 is going to be either a make or break year for Europe when it comes to the war, what they want to do for it, and both on the ammunition front, on the equipment front, but also, as I said, on the funding front. Well, because part of the funding that was designed for Ukraine, the 50 billion that passed, part of it was supposed to be financed by Russian proceeds. So basically, what the Euroclear had set aside because they legally cannot pay back Russia. It's right now it's forbidden. But as we said, first of all, there's a problem that Euroclear fears litigation, and it's gonna come because, as I said, contracts are contracts, and it's not Belgium or France or Luxembourg or whoever who has actually accepted to be the clearance house of Russia. It's a private institution. So, on that aspect, we have already a lot of promises that Europe has made to Ukraine that are not going to fruition. 5 huge billions are going to stay with Euroclear as litigation buffer. The proceeds initially of this year are still under scrutiny, and we're waiting mid or end of April over the decision to how to actually collateralize at least the proceeds. And most important part, it still isn't enough because you are spending crazy money for something that initially, and once again, if you go to that episode 10 on TWK Radio, I said the French didn't want to do this. They didn't want to piece money out. Now they are literally both spending money at home, which doesn't yield the results they want, but also they are piecing money abroad for a delivery that would be at best concomitant with what they are going to deliver themselves. So yes, there would be a doubling of, I'd say, supplies to Ukraine, but it's still far from what Ukrainians wanted or were promised. They were promised 1 million rounds for March 2024. They didn't even get 520,000. They were promised that 1 million would be delivered by end of 2024. Maybe it's gonna come right if everything is done, but we don't know if the Germans are not also partaking or putting part of their contribution within the pot of our friend Pavel bought on abroad. So all this indicates how both opaque and completely bullshit the European Union's approach has been for this war. And then we have recent articles suddenly waking up to the fact that, oh, we just changed our master when it comes to energy security and so on. I don't know if it's the Daily Mail, but I've seen it also in other publications where everybody's waking up saying, "Oh, now we are dependent on America for our gas, whereas before it was Russia." And they are also opening up this logic where, oh, at least with Russia we could oppose them, but with America they are literally are dead now. So the complete domestication of Europe's foreign policy has been achieved by the US. So on that aspect, it is to be said that the Americans played this pretty nicely. But once again, strategically, we have this problem where Europe seems to be nowhere. We will not speak about macaroni. We will not speak about Scholz. We'll just speak about the fact that prime ministers and politicians of nobody countries like the Baltics right now are leading the charge for fucking mental retardation and potential extinction of the European continent, because for them it costs nothing. Even if they want to send troops in Ukraine, they're going to send what, 1,000, 2,000 people? Of course, relatively is important. But the guys who are going to go there, fight, and get killed are going to be German, Polish, French, Spaniards, and so on. So what should help Europe right now is, first of all, get a grip of the situation. Two, put a fucking leash on the three chihuahuas and their friends. And also start making a simple calculus. The calculus here is the following. Within 2 years, this war against Russia from European side, and don't start with, oh, Europe is not at war with Russia. They are. De facto, only the euro is missing. Europe has been sabotaging itself. And no, I'm not going to start painting a rosy picture of Russia's economy. Oh my God, 3, 4, 5, 6%. No, Russia also is reeling because a symbiotic relationship has been broken, and both sides are losers in this, especially given that Russia has been shown the door for America. We're speaking purely about the rights of the European continent here. I'm not speaking globally. Globally, then we would have to delve into who's the real loser, and generally it'd be the West right now. Because first of all, they haven't closed the deal over Russia. Russia is still on its aggressive war, and it's winning. But on the other side, the silent partner of Russia, which is China, has yet to make a move. And I'm not speaking selling some fucking cheap ass subcomponents. I'm speaking about suddenly China decides to literally swap 300-400 artillery barrels to Russia. And then you're going to see the difference. Once again, the whole point we're seeing here is that there is still place for growth on the Russian side going forward, be that via North Korea transferring these guns, barrels, systems, or straight from China in one or other form. I already spoke about a couple of things. For instance, as I said, the new Krasnopol rounds are very weird. Let's tell them like this. They are reminiscent of an old Soviet program that was abandoned, but then you have the data bus, as I said, which is something the Russians never had. And of course, Russians are not stupid, but for 30 years, they didn't went behind it. Of course, circumstances are different, but there sure is a help there. And I'm not saying that without China it wouldn't happen. I'm saying that it helps to cut the corners sometimes, like with Iran and Shaheeds, like with North Koreans and extra ammunition, like with a couple of things from China. And it's logical. Russia should do it. There is no shame in this. They're opposing literally 40% of the world's GDP, and they like announcing it. America and France like saying on Russia here. But the most important part right now is once again what the war is becoming, where it is going. And it's literally mass slaughter of Ukrainians. Only that is going to save this war on the Russia side. And I'm saying what we have seen right now is nothing. If suddenly the Ukrainians make some stupid decision to go into localized counterattacks and put 5 to 10,000 people on those localized counterattacks, they're going to get slaughtered. And we will just have a restart of the dooming circle we had in November and December 2023. I would wish the Russians to have that, have the Ukrainians be stupid enough to counterattack at some point, get cut to pieces, cry like they know how to do, and at least start to have a start of discussion on how this war ends. Because on both sides, things have gone so far, there is no coming back from this. So even if the Russians would like to stop the war right now, there are now very strict and precise prerogatives and objectives they need to have achieved before they stop. And none of them is achieved. I'm just gonna post exactly what's missing. And this is, you can check on the subject. This is what is missing on the Russian side, and you can see the light pink or light beige, call it as you want. It's what is currently within the four oblasts that were annexed that are currently Russian legally. What's missing in order to have them fully, and of course, Kherson and one small part of Zaporozhye within the western part of Zaporozhye city is going to be very complicated to achieve because there is a Dnieper going through it. But all the rest, there is a land connection, so the Russians are not going to stop until they're there. And honestly, the Americans already know it. What is keeping this war going is Ukrainians thinking they can survive this, that will stop the Russians from taking those four oblasts. And of course, as I said, Kherson is going to be a problem. Uh, Northwestern Kherson is beyond the Dnieper. It would require a huge operation, but also would require them to capture parts of Kryvyi Rog and parts of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. On top of course, Kharkov to secure the northern border and so on and so forth. But most of it, if we stay literally just on the oblast borders, you can see that for the Russians, you have about 27% of their objectives still to be attained, which means that it looks as close as it's far, especially in the Donbass Oblast, Donetsk Oblast. You still have to go through, as I said, a huge chunk of cities and major ones: Pokrovsk, Konstantinovka, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk. Oh, we're not speaking million inhabitant city like Kharkov or Kiev or Dnipropetrovsk. We are speaking strictly about 100,000, 120,000, 80,000 people cities. And these are needed both as control nodes and logistical hubs, but also because they're part of the oblast themselves. Now, for the rest of the Q1, tactically, the biggest change has been the stalling tactics of the Ukrainian side, but also a large change in the artillery war. For most of the war, the Russians would lose two assets for one, at least two assets for one Ukrainian asset lost. But since January 2024, a bit earlier even, but from January it's really evident, Ukrainians are losing more assets as raw numbers. And it is extremely reminiscent of what the Russians did with the M77 at some point when you had full autism going behind the systems. And you would see a couple of them just going pop every 1 or 2 days. There are a lot of things that have changed on the Russian counter battery. Sometimes it's not what we would like to. So you probably saw the images of Terni, that assault when they were attacked by mortars, javelins, FPVs, and artillery. That's now the exception. Most of the attacks are countered by FPVs, of which, as I said, you have a huge problem, or by mines. But Terni probably was reinforced by artillery because it's that important. It's not as much important strategically, it's important mentally. Reaching Terni, expanding to Yampolivka, and going down puts an extreme strain on the Ukrainian defenses on that axis and would be a huge moral blow. How did this happen? How the Ukrainians started losing more artillery? Most importantly, why did this happen? Did it happen? I said the logic is that the Russians understood the game, and by having taken out a lot of longer range artillery, M77s, Crabs, IS-90s, putting the feelers on the Panzerhaubitze, the Archers, the Bogdanas. What remains now are shorter range systems like older M109s, Gvodzikas, Akatsias, some MSTs that still are in Ukrainian service, and of course towed artillery, a lot of it. We saw also the MLRS going down. We had the HIMARS surprise. But overall, what is changing is literally Russians have a sky domination that didn't have before. So the pressure that is being felt is that suddenly Russians are going to drop you with UMPKs, then FPVs are going to fly on your first line, Lancets are going to start hunting for whatever is moving, but at the same time, at any moment, you get supercams, Zalas, Orlans, and shit flying over you non-stop. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but we have less and less shutdowns of Lelekas, of Sharks, and we have on both sides FPV operators, drone operators getting targeted. And of course, the depletion of air defense on the Ukrainian side plays a huge role for that, because you cannot shoot these drones as you want. You then are forced to use other assets that initially are supposed to be there for Shahid defense or something else. This is how they actually took out the Patriot system. They added pressure by Su-30s and Su-34s. One Su-35 got shot, a little bit of a panic. A couple of attempts of Su-34s. They narrowed down the location via pure autistic power. No, of course not, I'm joking. And they surprised them on the move. And there it is. 3 TELs gone, 1 radar gone, 1 ground control vehicle gone. 20 people killed. Only 9 recognized by Butuzov, but as I said, it doesn't matter. That guy lies, but at least he recognizes the bottom line. And the bottom line is that you fucking lost a Patriot battery there. Another one is suspected, and I'm 100% sure, near Kherson. We saw the images. Plus, you had the books, you had the Nassams, you had a fuck ton of radars. You got the guys in Konstantinovka right now in Kharkov getting nailed. It's a different Russian army, guys. It's not perfect. It's much adapted to this war. So some things are not going to be the way they are presented by armies that have full control of their enemy. It's still a disputed airspace. It has to be, although there is localized air superiority at some point, it's still a disputed airspace. And being a disputed airspace means that you will not see what the Russians want actually to do, which is sending an Orion or sending a Mohajer and literally fucking laying waste to the defensive positions. It's sad, but it is like that. It needs to be accepted. We're year 3 of the war, and there hasn't been a solution for AD. Even when they're on the brink of extinction, they are being supplied with other shit. We had makeshift AD with Asrams. We had Stormers coming in. We had Crotal, by the way, still not seen in action. We had Aspides. We had a lot of stuff that was put in there. Soviet, non-Soviet. So there will always be something. And for Shahids, we had the Vampire system, which is basically those 70mm rockets with a laser guidance. Overall, we are down to what I said, that it's a way better place for the Russian aviation right now, although there were losses, at least one A-50 by friendly fire. Super nice guys. It's ironic, obviously. But beyond that, every day UMPKs are falling. Every day Ukrainians are crying. And then we had the UMPB and so on. So generally, the whole point, the whole position here is the following. what do we do? Where we go from here? And where we go from here, from the Russian perspective, is more of the same, pushing the Ukrainians to specific choke points, basically, if possible, pushing them as far as possible to their defensive lines they're building right now. Because that's the thing with defensive lines, people are going to think they're safe behind them. But what you want, if you're Russia, when you see where the defensive lines are right now, they are the nearest that was attempted to be bombed by UMPK is 12 kilometers from the current front line. But if the front line goes to that defensive line, it would mean 10 kilometers gained in depth to do something else, including to bring your planes closer in order to drop bombs further. So the construction of these defensive points, in my opinion, first of all, gives the wrong message to the Russians, but also tactically is going to create something of a potential route if things go bad, because the Ukrainians, first of all, what they're going to think is getting the fuck out and putting themselves into safety behind those lines. Of course, this will not stop the stalling tactics with, as I said, FPVs, some artillery, Baba Yagas, and so on. This is not going to stop. This, unfortunately, it's just too simple. And as I said, they can use Starlink. They can use an all array of systems to make it happen. But at every single point, every single action the Ukrainians are undertaking has a price, and they are pulling back because the price is too expensive. The cost of this is not sustainable for them as much as they say as it is not sustainable for the Russians. Take Avdiivka as a template and you will understand what I'm saying. Avdiivka resisted for 4 months, bit less, 3 actually, because by mid-January they had broken the second time to Artsevska Khotka, which precipitated the chaotic fall of the city. But this is what I expect to happen as a rollback to the Ukrainians if they keep going this stalling strategy, because it is not a strategy. Before it was funny, I'm not going to lie to you. In Avdiivka it was okay because most of the time the Russians abandoned their equipment or got stuck in a kind of no man's zone, and it wouldn't be possible to claim it as occupied. But now what's going on is that every week or 10 days, the positions of the Russian forces go forward so they can recover whatever is lost, but they also can recover ground. And as I said, it's very important in the option that at some point the Russians would stop, voluntarily or not. I think they're going to have this operational pause to assess their location, their position within their plans, but also in the map and also within their logistical capabilities. And they will decide, in my opinion, to just go the Ukrainians into a counterattack in order to reverse all the losses. And we've seen that a couple of times. There was one attempted counterattack around Umanske. Guys got the fuck out. There was another counterattack attempted around Pervomaisk. Went nowhere. Nevelske went nowhere. Right now, attacking is mostly doomed to fail because you do not have the capability of surprising your adversary. And this works for both sides. Locally, both sides have a fuck ton of eyes looking at you. So how do the Russians advance? As I said, recon by fire, losses, pull back, planes fly in, bomb the shit out of general location when FPVs and resistance has been checked, send another convoy, it passes fine, it doesn't pass, you redouble the bombardment. And it is like this. Of course, artillery plays a role. FPVs also play a role to cut the sustainability on the other side, and also cut sometimes the few logistical assets that are coming and going. But generally, that's how it's going to go. It's just going to be sheer raw firepower and the liquidation of the Ukrainian forces by explosive mass. I know that last year and in 2022 it was seen as a cope, but it's just not. Most importantly, in 2022, we had these reports of lacking people, not enough ammunition, depleted areas. Moors got famous by literally saying that Kharkov was going to fall. The Kharkov area of the front was going to crumble. Of course, now Moors ate lead-laced chocolate. That can say this are not saying it. We are having a lot of people complaining about a lot of things, and it's normal because it's still a shit show. But we do not hear we are lacking men, we are lacking ammunition. And this was one of the biggest points between November and January 2023 and 2024, before the breakout. I'm not saying the situation is great, but theirs is worse. This is the point. This is how this war is going. It's who is in bad shit and who is in the worst shit. The moment when one side is gonna have a great time means that the other side will be depleted as fuck. And honestly, I do not see the Ukrainians, unless something dramatic happens, recover from the current creeping offensive before next year. Not that they would suddenly become better or whatever. I'd say just recover, like be fixed on what they want to do and have at least a functional strategy. We are in April, it's the fourth month of a year. Within 2 months, we are at the second half of the year. I hope the Ukrainians know what they're doing. If indeed the Czech rounds come by July and some of the F-16s come by July. Because everything else is not coming at any kind of rate that would help them sustain anything. And of course, some artillery is coming as well, as I said, partially from France, those 70 M114s from Greece, probably one or two scavenged M1980 or similar systems. But yeah, overall, this is what's going on until the second half of the year. If at the second half of the year nothing changes, then we have a problem. Then there is something missing completely. And of course, we should also be wary about the American presidential election, because although Trump might allegedly cut funding for Ukraine, we never know what he's really going to do. The guy is a liability for many things, and some of those things are exactly what we don't want to have right now, which is a sudden flux of money to Ukraine. Not that will change much, but it would simply keep the war going. And more money would mean also a production program from Ukraine, which would last at least 2 to 3 years. And that means for 2 to 3 years, Ukrainians will be able to sustain, even in a more contracted way, their defense. And this is, once again, what I said, this is what we do not want. Because if we go to that point, so it's 2027, and the Ukrainians are still fighting, even if they are in Dnipropetrovsk, it doesn't matter. That means that many people have still died. And as I said, this is not about Ukraine, it's literally about Russia. Losses are high on both sides, lower proportionally for Russia, but they're high on both sides for the kind of war we're seeing. And I'm more and more turning to the point that it's worth it only if we are in Dnipropetrovsk. If we still are fighting 2026 for the borders of Donbass area, I will not say it shouldn't happening, but those are political and military objectives. You need to achieve them. But it would be a huge, 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 huge disappointment. Mostly because we would be in a phase of the carnage that would make it useless for Ukraine even to claim a kind of moral or whatever victory. As I said, I made a small calculus. If the Ukrainians are losing a minimum of 20,000 people a year, the payouts alone, the golden handshake for the killed in action for those 20,000 people are $500 million. It's just once payment lump sum, and then you need to take care of the family for a while. But 20,000, we know it's it's not even a minimum. It's a joke. These guys are probably over 100,000 people dead in 2 years. So they're going to pay 1.2 billion just on Kia handshake, and plus you gotta have the wounded that in base case scenario are going to be the same. So each and every year they spend 2.5 billion just in wounded and killed. Now, their budget for this year is another 40 something million for defense, and the revenues are 43 billion. It's completely fucked up. It makes no sense. The only thing that makes sense for Ukraine right now by staying alive is they are serving a purpose for someone else. And of course, we agree to this. Like, they are now far beyond their own control. They are literally being used as pawns. But let's say we are in 2026 with the same rhythm. How is the West going to justify it to the Ukrainians? They say, oh, you guys lost 300,000 killed as a minimum, plus a million wounded, of which 200,000 are amputees. Okay, it's good because, for the Paralympics, they're going to have a lot of medals, but what the fuck? How are you going to justify 1.3, 1.2 million casualties for a pool of people of roughly 6 million? I know that it sounds a bit dramatic, and it's not. Once again, that's nothing to do with me. Normal human decency. But what are you going to do at some point? What is the logic? Where does this stop? How does the West going to justify that, you just scarred for life a whole nation, and you are precipitating them to a obvious demographic catastrophe? Because once again, I'm going to repeat, less people in the controlled territories means that over time they're going to be taken over if Russia keeps going at it. It's literally burning the candle by both ends. And of course, we all know the cynicism of NATO and friends, but at some point, someone needs to wake up. And for that, I'm not sure the Ukrainians are waking up, although the polls are slightly changing. But at the end, who the fuck cares? The decision is going to be more made in Washington, Brussels, or whatever than in Kiev. Kiev is just going to be presented a choice. Of course, not by Russia, because Russia bad, but by their own partners, and they're going to go for it. America is going to fight as much as possible to get Zelejido and his friends to a place when they're going to not get hanged by the Russians. And once again, this is just if nothing changes, nothing dramatic, like no intervention, no fuck ton of ammunition and hardware being sent, just current or even last year's attempts to fight Russia. And also do not forget, for Ukraine, it is better that Russia keeps the initiative and exhausts, quote unquote, itself for the next 2 years. If Ukraine tries to counterattack this year, it's going to be a bloodbath and is going to, for obvious reason, facilitate the Russian victory. But next year is going to be even worse. Because 2023 was, as I said, a rebuilding year for the Russians. This year, they are experiencing from October already, the full onslaught of Ukrainian non-contact warfare. Only thing that's going to change, that might change, is more planes on the Ukrainian side. But everything else is there. Everything else is there. In a sense, it's good that it keeps going like this, because if Russia keeps killing Ukrainian soldiers, there will have to be a replacement for everyone. Drone operators, active infantry, tankers, and so on. The burden of training is still higher on the Ukrainian side. But also it means less experience if frontline troops are swooped away. It's just, once again, we're going to manage to go to the perspective matter. Ukrainians will not be able to follow up Russian mobilization. And we heard Zelensky that said by June 1st, Putin is going to mobilize 300,000 more. This kind of announcement, to me personally, is funny, but it's good as well on the same time. Because their fear is still the same. It is not Russian planes, Russian bombs, Russian tanks. It is Russian people. It's the Russian military itself. It's the bodies on the line. So this is the most important lesson to be learned from the last 6 months now. Ukraine has 3 main problems, but the first and foremost problem is it doesn't have the critical mass to resist Russia. if they want the war to the finish. And I already explained, if the Ukrainians think that with more drones and long range attacks they're going to hurt the Russians, the war is going to change into late 2022, early 2023, when Russia is going to start slamming attacks on civilian and dual targets and start causing actual damage to the Ukrainian nation. So this is the whole point. Everybody who is fearing these attacks on refineries and stuff like that, people calm down. These are not real attacks. The real attacks are if America decides suddenly that it wants to take part in the shit show and just flies 900 cruise missiles all over Western Russia. That's going to be an attack. So right now everything is manageable for the Russians, and more than manageable. That was it for this space, guys. If you want to participate, ask questions, intervene, whatever, the floor is yours. Go on, Tuni. Yeah, go on, man.
Oh yeah, so I wanted to ask like a more retrospective question. So you know the whole I mean, everyone knows about the whole cargo cult of leopards, but last year. But I'm just like, I've never really like figured out like why didn't the like Ukrainians like constantly spam France, the French government petition it to like send like clerics, because basically like I theorized it was because they saw Schultz as not sending enough to Ukraine. But I mean, at that point, like Germany sent as much SPGs as France did, and it's just like weird how like there was no cargo cult around the Leclercs or any like French IFV, like the VBCLs with the 30 mils, and of course the Italian all Italian AFVs, because I mean like it was weird how there was like so much hype about like Slovenia sending like M55s, but there's no like worship of like constant like where's Centauro, where's Centauro, where Ariete, where what was it, Dardo, and such. Yeah, do you have any like opinion or insight into that?
Well, when it comes to why no Leclerc, that's the simplest thing. There are literally 200 of them with more or less 90 being kept active, and 60 are in Romania.
That's still more than Challenger.
What?
That's still more than Challenger twos.
Yeah, but that's not the problem, man. The point is that the French understood. They didn't want to get the ridicule that the Brits are getting. I mean, for fuck's sake, they made all this shit show about showing away the Copleron that was called by the Dragon Teeth. It was such a shit show about bragging and stuff. One got smashed and it was done. They were pulled it back, and Ukrainians themselves are saying this tank has no future in Ukraine. It's too heavy. We're using the gun mostly for anti defensive positions. It doesn't even have a high explosive round. They are using hash. Like, come on. The French at least understood how it was going to go because they saw how the war was going to go. Of course, why did they send IMX-10 RCs? Because they actually didn't want to look like ass wipes. And of course, they sent a lot of these IMX-10 RCs, over 40, I think. But overall, the commitment from the European partners has been lackluster when it comes to tanks. If it wasn't about the plan from Netherlands, Czech Republic, and the US to buy T-72 M1s and transform them into these freak T-72 EAs, Poland would be the biggest supporter of Ukraine when it comes to armor. With all its T-71, T-72 M1, M1R being sent, between 40 and 60 twardies, like they cleaned house. And of course, it made sense because basically they were going to receive the M1A1 FEPs, but there's just not enough. Don't forget, guys, I'm going to be honest with you, but Ukraine has lost proven more tanks than everyone else in Europe except for Turkey. And Turkey's fleet, half of it is dog shit. Like the peace dividends are the greatest ally when it comes to Russia's situation with supplies and assets towards Ukraine. Because in the whole of Europe, you're gonna find maybe 1,700 Leopard Leopard 2s, a something. Russia has, on paper and proven, losses that far dwarf what the whole tank force in Europe is. And of course, if you add the Leclercs, the Arietes, and the Challengers, you're going to arrive around 2,400 tanks. But we know that 75 or a little bit more Challenger 2s are available. Arietes 30 were available before the program. I posted the data. With the French 90 are available. The German tanks themselves were dog shit. They had to refurbish and give whatever they could. Polish Leopard 2A4s were also dog shit. It's just how it is. The Europeans literally thought that with a linear army pulled together and under the banner of NATO slash the US, they could defeat everyone else. They just forgot there is a fucking ocean between them. And of course, this war is extremely costly for both sides, but when it comes to the replacement rate and so on, Ukraine is at a huge disadvantage. That's why they're not risking their tanks. Even when they risk them, they lose them right away. There was this case which is absolutely amazing. Today there was a video of that Abrams that got hit twice, once in the engine and the second time around the crew in the bustle. This was such a completely useless, unnecessary loss. The Ukrainians do not need to use these tanks for whatever they were going to use them for. Probably it was around Berdishi or between Berdishi and Novomutivka. The place is lost. I would like literally go to the next station, you know? No, they need to do this bullshit. And that's what was going to happen to the Leclerc as well. And also the biggest problem is that the Leclerc, I like the design, I'm not gonna lie, but the moment you hit the bustle and that thing blows, you also fuck up your loading mechanism. Because unlike the mechanism on the Japanese Type 90 and Type 10, it's an integrated arm with a push-through mechanism. The Koreans have just the same type. It's not as good as the Leclerc, but it's the same logic. With this push-through chain link, what you are doing is that you are integrating everything in a nice package so you can pull it out, repair whatever you want. But with this arm movement, as in the Megit autoloader on the Japanese one, you are still preserving your autoloader, even if that shit is busted. Of course, you can always load it manually. But I think honestly, the French made the right call because it would have been a shit show. Plus, yeah, their IMX RCs were slandered by the Ukrainians, so I'm not really sure that it would have changed anything. On the other side, we have a complete. I mean, the Leopard 1 A5s that were supposed to add another 100 or so units, they're not there. What are they doing with these tanks? Even in training, they're not there anymore. One of those was seen fallen off a truck a couple of days past. I think it was in Germany or in the Netherlands. So like we are going to all those spaces where it doesn't matter. It's just why. Honestly, I think the French analyzed the situation correctly and said, no, we're not risking a tank we cannot produce anymore in short term, and that's it. However, these talk about buying back some weapons in the Gulf could have been something if they could have bought back 2030 from the United Emirates for Ukraine. And also, it would have been a nice tank because those are climatized Leclercs, tropicalized actually. So yeah,
Yeah, it's thanks. It's yeah. I was just it was like a wandering, because it seemed to me like I know the French, like it's definitely like logical for the French to have like not like even initiated sending them, but it's just like strange how they like evaded like all like PR flack from the Baltoids and the Butthurt belt and the Nordic belt, like for not sending like AFVs. It's just like weird how Meloni and Macron like just completely evaded like any like PR like backlash and like Die Hiroshi from the Baltoids, like because like Schultz like got a huge amount of like PR like flack simply for like delaying like martyrs a bit, while like not even like leopards but just martyrs, and while like Melania was like never like made like any like naval Russia traitor memes, neither
yeah, I
Macron.
understand, but we have also to go back to the basics. The basics are that I think the Germans got a lot of flack because there was this internal resistance that we're seeing also with the Towers missiles. When Scholz is like, guys, open your motherfucking eyes. I think the internal debate within Germany is not that the Towers is complicated and this, although we had this leaked audio, I think Scholz understands the point is that what are we going to do? The only way to defeat Russia is to enter in a war with Russia. Do we want to do it? No, then shut the fuck up. Don't ask for more and take it. Nobody wants to hear him because everybody is in this fucking mindless self delusion that they're gonna defeat Russia, partition it, and all this shit. Me, I'm like, even if the situation changes slightly for the better for Ukraine, it's going to take them more years just to go back to the same situation that we are right now, when the Russians are gonna make their fucking size felt. I'm not getting mad at you, Tunia. Quite the contrary. But I'm just saying, like, I think Scholz has analyzed this properly. Macron as well. Just Macron at some point needs to do something because he yapped a lot. But what's the follow up? Is Macron sending more shit? No. Oh wow, he sent 50 ISM hammers per month. Those are, I'm sorry to say that, those are literally chicken shit compared to the 200 to 300 HIMARS missiles that the Americans sent. And of course, people are going to say, yeah, but they can. But at the same time, the Americans also send about 100 JDAM per month. So we are into a logic where you shouldn't read too much into what was given, what wasn't given. But what we should read is why Scholz, for instance, is being so reluctant on towers and so reluctant on anything. He is being massacred on that because everybody wants to see things burn, but nobody wants to see deeper. The German,
Emperor's new clothes situation.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, it's very funny that Scholz is the maybe not the one, but is among the few that is seeing where this is going. And at the same time, this is also maybe the character of a representative or democratic, call it what as you wish, system, where you need to deal with other people. You cannot decide on your own. On a certain sense, I would say it's par for course. But on the other side, my biggest scare is, as I said, is that a guy like Macron might try something funny. That thing's gonna backfire. And of course, he let out this statement that we took losses in Africa, so we're not gonna ask for help from NATO. I'm like, bitch, you had to cry for NATO in Afghanistan, Nuruzgan, and I'm sorry for the French guys that might listen. It was a huge scandal because you complained that the Italians were paying the Taliban not to attack them, and then you got a fire team wiped out. What the fuck? So on that sense, once again, I'm going to repeat: a lot of the shit talk that Macron is doing will lead to no consequence right away, because he actually put some breaks. He said, if Odessa, if this, if that. And of course, it's logical that if the situation is going to go tits up for Ukraine, NATO is not going to stay silent and let the Russians completely raise Kiev. But it's true that there are going to be red lines. There are going to be call outs. You're going to see more accumulation of troops and forces around the Ukraine's borders. This is also something that you cannot, the same way that the Russians couldn't hide what they're doing as deployment, NATO cannot do it either. So just like we should just like wait a little bit out. The most important part would be who is going to be able to deliver more armor to Ukraine, and the only guys that could do this, except for the Germans, because they announced also like 100 martyrs and shit like that, if I remember well, are the US. Nobody else has it. Some countries in Europe, if they want to deliver anything meaningful to Ukraine, will have to empty their stocks. America can do that with the M1117. Um, Private companies can sell you shitty rust buckets like the Roshen or the BATT-UMG, but that's not how you fight a war. We saw how fucked up the MATVs were for offensive actions. So on that aspect, a lot of people are claiming the death of the tank, the death of the infantry fighting vehicle, and so on. The reality is that it's far from the case. It's really far from the case. For your offensive operation, you still need those IFVs or APCs or those tanks, because they're better armored than anything else you can throw there. And we've seen a shit ton of things getting attacked. Okay, maybe some wraps are going to be resistant, but you're going to still lose your mobility, because they're going to wreck up your engine. They're going to fuck up your axles. So the whole logic on, what is going to be sent is going to depend once again on what's available. And what's available in Europe is not much. What's available in America is a lot more. But then you have another problem, is that the Americans would then have to kiss goodbye to a fuck ton of material. And given how now in defensive posture the Ukrainians are losing Bradleys, Abrams, M115s, and all this shit, if they go on the offensive and they are met with FPVs the same way that the Russians were met in Avdiivka, or the Ukrainians were met in Robotine, man, you are going to literally evaporate a whole bunch of American armor. And also, Ukrainians do not seem to take any kind of precautions to proof these very precious assets from FPVs. I'm not speaking about Lancets or whatever, just FPVs. Half of the Abrams that we've seen hit have been hit by FPVs. There have been two or three by ITGMs and another one by RPG, but most of those have been like you can see where this is going. So yeah, sorry if it was a bit longish.
Yeah, thanks for the details. Yeah, and one like last question. So basically, so it became clear that the Ukraine demobilized, what was it, 100,000 conscripts, and the way, and I did read in detail about conscription in Ukraine that at the start of the SMO, Ukraine had a bunch of like conscripted men, but for whatever reason, they were never put in on the front lines, and they were just like left to like do like fuck all in like military bases, and now they're demobilizing them, but and like what I know is that most of them are like around 18 to like 20 years old. And what's weird is that like why did the Ukraine never like send them to the front lines? Because like a PR standpoint, it would make more sense that to send like actual conscripts than like pull like press gang 40-year-old men on the street, especially now because like just like the situation is desperate. Like Russian sources are on Ukrainian territory, so like there should be like theoretically no like political or like strategic like roadblocks to sending like these conscripts to like replace like tired like non-demobilized soldiers.
What do you mean? Which side? Because I think I misunderstood you. You're saying that the Ukrainians demobilized 100,000 or Russians?
They demobilized 100,000 conscripts who are like basically like post high school like males like around 18 or something who are just staying in military bases, and they weren't like doing anything like throughout the war, and they're still not doing
Well, that seems to me like a hard ass PR because I have Ukrainian losses between 18 and 23 years old, and it's not as much as the 40 years old, but and also it's pretty simple. We have all seen the age pyramid when it comes to Ukraine. That's the weakest age branch. 18 to 25, it's a fucking shit show. So if they put those guys and kill them, who's gonna make babies later?
Yeah, but I read there was also some kind of like constitutional like legal like impediment like ban on sending these like conscripts because
Yes, but that's
I
the
did
cause.
read I
That's the
read a
cause.
quote.
That's the cause. The amendment that now they're lowering the conscription age from 27 to 25 is mostly due to that because Ukraine has a real demographic ticking bomb, and the same thing also happened for the Russians. The Russians also not sending their conscripts to a war zone. It's also illegal to put the conscripts on a war zone. There was a scandal in February and March 2022, and these guys were pulled right away. But the logic is that this is your future. You're not gonna kill your future. And on that aspect, I completely, I'd say, understand if these people literally stand into barracks doing nothing. However, it looks to me like a waste, a literally military waste when it comes to the resources you need to keep these guys inside and also not get bombed. Because if these guys were in bases, it would have, you know, been quite easy to target them. While most of the targets we've seen, okay, Nikolaev barracks was something, Shevchenko plant, Yavoriv, and so on, that has also happened. But most of the attacks we're seeing now is on combat units. The latest in Selidovo was the latest on Selidovo was also pretty rough, and there were images of these guys that were putting ammunition crates within the school classes, but um, it's pretty simple. It's just preserving both a reality, which is it's the weakest demographic strata within the Ukraine age tree, but at the same time, it's also very logical. It's your future. So uh, I know that it sounds a bit stupid, but you know, if you have more old people who already have a family, children, so basically they can continue this path, it makes a bit more sense than killing basically kids. I mean, that's my view on this. And probably
the politicians' views. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was just like I was like viewing it from like the thought that basically it's like soldiers who are like over 40 and like trained for 3 days. They're kind of like they're basically useless for anything other than defense. So it was like just the uh so just this thought that maybe like wondering why if soldiers who are basically not rotated and are like old and haven't gotten any training, like we're just gotten like 2 weeks training at most, like it would have made sense to send some conscripts who had like a few months training. But yeah, that from a demographic standpoint it's like a lose-lose situation, and from a tactical standpoint too, basically like do you lose because you have like Volkstorm that cannot be rotated, or do you lose because um your young age bracket gets reduced?
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. So, if anyone else wants to intervene, please do, guys. Otherwise, well, we will see each other probably on Saturday. Okay, guys. Then it will be. Thank you very much. We would on Saturday I will be a lot more thematic, so it's gonna be mostly the assessment of the advance on Donetsk Oblast, a little bit up north, but we're gonna see what happens with Terni if the Terni thing is true. And then I'm gonna have a look at the fortifications of the current fortifications of Ukrainians and see if there is any kind of stupid, at least on the position, if it's anything stupid. Probably there's going to be a lot of stupid shit because with the Russians was just the same. Uh, but so bear with me, it's going to be a bit more tricky on Saturday. Thank you very much, guys. Have a nice day. Bye bye.